J.D. Vance is very Breitbart approved. He's only 39. But a great future for the MAGA movement, a true rags to riches story. The left loved him until he came out as a Republican. And if you're not sure, if you're unsure, you don't quite know, I don't quite trust, I don't know enough about him, that's great. I'm okay with that instinct of yours. But I think this point by Tucker Carlson is a good starting point.
So now J.D. Vance is the VP pick. And I think every person who pays close attention has got to be thrilled by that. And if you don't know much about J.D. Vance, I'm not even going to make a case for J.D. Vance. I'm going to tell you what I just saw, which is that every bad person I've ever met in a lifetime in Washington was aligned against J.D. Vance.
All right. So the people who you want to hate J.D. Vance, hate J.D. Vance. Or the people you don't like, hate J.D. Vance, which is good. And that's Republicans, like Mitt Romney, like those people hate J.D. Vance. Beautiful. But then also people on the left, like we played the clip earlier of Van Jones last night saying the typical line, which is Trump's bad, but JD's worse because he actually believes it. Trump just says it to get ahead, but JD truly believes it at his core, and that makes him more dangerous. Van Jones says that Trump should have chosen Nikki Haley to be his vice president. So if those people are against JD, that's a great starting point for we're probably in a very good place. Last point on JD for now. Alex Marlow, our very own, the editor-in-chief of Breitbart.com, back in 2021, went to his house and did a 90-minute interview with JD sitting on the couch. And I listened to a good portion of it, and we'll just play this one clip for now and much more to come later.
I don't think should have been forced to to train his own replacement in his own country. Of course, he got depressed by that because it's pretty depressing to know you're going to lose your job and to have to train the person who's going to replace you. So he went into his truck after a few weeks and shot himself in the head, right? Who do we care more about, right? I don't think the guy who wants to work in his job is a bad person. In fact, he's probably a good person, probably a good, hard-working person, but we owe a debt. We owe a certain responsibility to the people who are American citizens. Whether they became American citizens 3 weeks ago or their family's been here for 10 generations, we owe something to the people who are here in this country legally. And we can't, I think, meet that obligation to them if we're flooding the market with competition, whether it's illegal or whether it's legal. I'm a pretty big fan of sort of the proposals I've seen out there, Tom Cotton's RAISE Act to change the legal immigration system in this country. There's also an important cultural component of this that sort of people don't like talking about, but I think is important. I think of myself as very pro-immigrant and very pro-immigration. I just don't want to have, look, you can be pro-immigrant and pro-immigration, but what's the right number into this country, right? Is it 10,000? Is it 100,000? Is it 100 million? Right? Just because you're pro-immigration doesn't mean you don't recognize there need to be some limits on the way that the country accepts immigrants. And I think that's especially true, because I think this point is really important. It's especially true in a country where the elites hate their own history and hate the people who live in this country. It's one thing to assimilate 500,000 or 1 million immigrants when the leadership of the country is saying, well, this is a good place. Here, go and learn about history. Be proud of where we came from. This is now your country too. But when the message that our elites are sending to immigrants is, this is a crappy, terrible country, follow the likes of Ilhan Omar as opposed to the heroes that made this country great, you can't assimilate people successfully when you don't have that sense of shared purpose and pride of place.
That's great. And those were JD's dogs in the background, if you heard those. Love, that's perfect, right? That's great. Off many of the things we talk about here on the show. You talked about culture. And I think that's the most important thing when talking about JD as well, is the culture that he grew up in. That's the whole root of Hillbilly Elegy. It's the whole point of his book. He talked about the culture and, what is the right number of immigrants coming in. I would also argue the culture of where these immigrants are coming from. And he talked about cultural assimilation from our point and how so many people here hate America. The elites hate America. That's true. But I'd also like to know what the cultural assimilation potential is for someone from the Congo versus someone from Jamaica. And maybe one culture assimilates better into the culture that we are/want to be. So maybe we should take more people from Jamaica than the Congo or whatever. Because what is this country, what is immigration for? Is it for the people of the Congo or is it for us? And JD is thinking right. on those issues. I just mentioned in the last segment, so I'll play this clip here briefly, and we'll probably table it for tomorrow just because there's so much to do. And I want to get to the RNC. That's the main point of this hour. Someone called in the last hour and said, hey, I just don't know about his voting record. I'm curious to learn more. And Kevin, I'm so grateful for that attitude and approach. And I said, well, the last thing he did, the last bill he proposed would end all DEI in the entire federal government, and it would ban the government from contracting with any company any private company that has any DEI in it as well. So it's a great bill, root out DEI, and hopefully it would root out DEI in, of all places, a place none of us would have ever dreamed it would exist, and that is the Secret Service. This is the head of the Secret Service right here being interviewed yesterday.
Who is most responsible for this happening?
What I would say is that the Secret Service is responsible for the protection of the former president.
So the buck stops with you?
The buck stops with me. I am the director.
That was a little slow. The buck stops with me?
Buck stops with me. I am the director of the Secret Service. It was unacceptable, and it's something that shouldn't happen again.
The President and Homeland Security Secretary said today they had 100% confidence in you.
Real quick, I'm sorry. Something that shouldn't happen again. We've all made mistakes at work. Sir, it won't happen again. I've never made this big of a mistake.
But there are some members of Congress calling on you to resign.
I appreciate the Secretary's comments, and we're going to continue to be transparent and communicate with people.
You plan to stay on? Absolutely.
I do plan to stay on.
That's great. Her hearing is July 22nd, by the way, in front of the House Oversight Committee. But this leads to the question, what does it take to get fired from the Biden administration? What would one have to do? If you're the head of the Secret Service and a bullet from an assassin hits the president of the United States, former president, soon to be next president, that, noted, not enough to get fired. You have one job at the Secret, actually you have two, I guess. The Secret Service really, it started as a counterfeit money they investigated counterfeit money. I think they still do that. And I don't know how it went from we're investigating counterfeit money to we're going to protect the president. I don't know how those two things ever combined under the Secret Service, but whatever. So whatever, you got two jobs. And I'd say the most important one is probably make sure the president doesn't get killed. And you blew it. And she's like, I plan on staying on. Buck stops with me, but I plan on staying on. All right. So anyway, JD wants to get rid of all this DEI nonsense in the federal government. So it's a good, you ask what his history is with voting. Well, there's his most recent. All right, let's talk about some highlights from yesterday. Yesterday, a good warm up, good ramp up into the week that is the RNC. No one used the line, although I suppose only Trump could use it, of friends, Americans, countrymen, lend me your ears. No one ever used that. Maybe that's only Trump could use it. So I think the big newsworthy thing, and gentlemen, correct me. Oh, I should say this too. Producer Zach and JD, basically neighbors from hometowns right down the street. So producer Zach will heretofore be known as Hillbilly Zach.
Love it.
I didn't know you had such strong hillbilly roots.
Well, you even said he imported his hillbilly Kentucky roots up into Ohio.
Say that. What's that? Say
you had said he imported his hillbilly Kentucky roots into Ohio, correct?
That's right. So you're not.
So I'm a distinguished gentleman who had to put up with him.
That's right. Fair enough. I still like the name Hillbilly Zach, though. So we're going to, I think, roll with that.